Just when we thought King James couldn't get any more vile, after plotting with his aunt, Queen Elizabeth, to have his mother decapitated so that they could snatch up all of her territories and reign in her place. He went on to do something just as dark because he hated women. It was said that he had many love affairs with young men, even his own cousin, giving us a little bit of light on who this person was. Do you know that he intentionally distorted some of the translations in the New King James Bible? So before we get into his hatred for women and his own mother, let me tell you about how he distorted this very important verse of the Bible. The infamous line, "Man shall not lay with man." This is often used to condemn homosexuality, but it wasn't originally written that way. In the early Hebrew text, this verse was specific, referring to grown men lying with children, with boys. The verse condemns the peds, never condemned same-sex relations. But King James, a man surrounded by court scandals and desperate to redirect the attention, twisted the original meaning so that it couldn't bite him in the ass. It was to fuel shame, division, and ultimately control people's identities. Another deliberate lie buried in translation, and it's time to bring the truth to light. Now let's get into how King James hated his mother, hated women, liked to be with young boys, and how he knew he was lying and did it intentionally to fit his narrative. Remember, this is the man that created the book Demonology, which talked all about demons, and then wrote several books about witches and witchcraft. And you all know that if you were raised Catholic, you're not even supposed to look into those things. He was an expert. The passage, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," Exodus 22:18, used to persecute and justify the offing of witches. Mostly women accused of witchcraft. But was it witchcraft? It wasn't. They did this especially during the Inquisition and all of the witch trials in Europe, that then led to them doing it in colonial America. So the original Hebrew word was mekashapa. The word translated as witch in the King James Version of the Bible is mekashapa, derived from the root word kashaf. But here's the twist. Kashaf does not mean a spiritual woman, a healer, or those that we used to call wise women. It was more often associated with sorcery, dark magic. It had to involve manipulation, deception, harming others. And it refers to poisoning and dark magic of this sort. The key difference is the intent. In ancient Hebrew culture, the mekashapa was someone believed to be using occult powers to manipulate, to control, and also to harm others, especially through evoking demonic spirits or maleficent forces. But what does kashaf really mean? It means a malicious magician, a poisoner and a spellcaster. Use hidden knowledge to deceive or destroy. Not the same as a midwife, oracle, seer, healer, which many of these witches were just this, and in their communities doing good. The fact that early texts like the Talmud distinguish between good magic for healing and protection and sorcery for harm. So he basically got everything, good and bad, and lumped it all together. Mostly because of the obsessive persecution against women that he had. So the real tragedy is that over time, due to mistranslations, cultural fear, and patriarchal agendas, the term witch became a call-out for any woman practicing folk healing, midwifery, and or independent spirituality. This verse literally became weaponized. It's what they used during the Salem witch trials, the Inquisition, and all other purges. Remember, the ancient world had many forms of spiritual practices, but later the church structures rewrote basically almost all of them, and demonizing all pre-Christian traditions, especially the female-centered ones. At the end of the day, the original witches were herbalists, midwives, priestesses of the goddess, astrologers, dream interpreters, seers, oracles, everybody demonized. And that happened when he said that it was all one category. there was no longer the importance of the intent. So in summary, the word witch in Exodus 22:18 is a form of Hebrew called kashaf, which more accurately refers to sorcery that causes harm, not a wise healer or a wise woman. So this passage has been mistranslated and misused for centuries now. The true witches were often spiritual women, guardians of ancient tradition, and victims of political and religious control. So if the verse King James turned, put you against women that were wise women healing the divine feminine, and he, instead of following the origin Hebrew scriptures of where it was condemned to lay with children, he turned that into adult men. You ever heard those videos where they talk about him and his infatuation with younger boys? This is why. He was trying to cover for himself and push his own agenda. And yet, we find millions of people still following the Bible that he planted on purpose.